Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to a new video on our channel, and today we want to talk about should we fold overpairs in the 3-bet pot or is this a no-go? Yeah, let's jump into the action. So this hand was posted in our private Discord group, and we play in a 2-5 lineup under the gun limps, so we are for sure in a good game when under the gun goes ahead and limps. We have pocket tens and we ISO. Of course we should raise, and Hero bumps it up to 40 bucks, so 8x, that's a huge ISO. What do you think, Mariano? Is it necessary to raise so big?
No, I don't think so. I mean, under very special circumstances, maybe, but the problem here is that we're out of position. The student did say that he was getting called a lot when he ISO'd, so he decided to start going bigger, but I think that's fine if we have something like aces or kings, but with a hand like tens, if you get called by a couple spots, being out of position with this hand is just not great in massive pots, so I'd rather just go standard like 5 or 6x. And it also allows us to raise a wider range, right? If you're making it 40 here, like you can only be able to raise like a really narrow range. Like tens would basically be the bottom of our range in a sense, right? Like we maybe could do this like nines plus or something. So I think just a bit smaller, but it's not a disaster, obviously. In these games, it's fine. And if you're in position, it's going to be a lot better, right? If a bunch of limpers limp and then you want to go really massive when you can play the pot in position, then that's much better. But again, here, it's just kind of a dangerous hand to be playing out of position multi-way. So I understand the sentiment of trying to get it heads up, but he was saying that people were calling regardless, against bigger sizes anyways. So yeah, I would just play standard size.
Yeah, I also think this way. And as you mentioned, when MP calls and hijack calls, button calls, you're in such a shitty spot, out of position, and the pot is already bloated so much. And yeah, when we change the situation a bit, we are on the button and we ISO to 50, 60 bucks. Completely different scenario when you know under the gun is not able to fold and he wants to see a flop desperately. But let's see what happened. So we ISO to 8x, and now the cutoff goes ahead and bumps it up to 120, so 3x our open, so standard size I would say. The action goes back on us, and yeah, now we have the question, should we fold? Probably not. Should we call or should we 4-bet? What do you think? This is already a dicey situation, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think 4-betting's out of the question. It's just way too loose for 150 big blinds here in these positions. 4-betting is just lighting money on fire, in my opinion. And I think folding is actually not out of the question, in my opinion, because after we make it 8x in early position and this guy comes and 3-bets us, like his range is going to be so nutted. So a hand like this is going to be very tough to play out of position. It's obviously one of the hands we can flat, but I would say if we were any shallower, if we started the hand with like 500, even 600, but we just weren't getting that great implied odds, as far as flopping set, I would actually consider folding here just because his range is just way too tight against our ISO. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Yeah, great point. I think you really named the problem here, and the problem is when you ISO to 8x against an under the gun limp, your ISOing range is so strong. We basically have like 9s plus, maybe 10s plus, who knows, ace jack suited plus, ace queen offsuit plus, something like this. And no one in those live games will attack you, right? He's not threading with a hand like ace 3 suited or jack 10 suited. He mainly has a top 3, top 4% range. And against this range we are smoked, plus we are out of position, and we have no clue on which board we can continue, on which board we should fold, because we're out of position. Of course, when we're in position, different story, it's way easier to realize equity, stuff like this. But out of position, it's so dangerous. And as you mentioned, when we just have around 100 big blinds effective, to start the hand, I'm also considering folding most of the time, especially when villain is an unknown or ABC rack, a standard rack. But yeah, everything besides a maniac, I would consider folding when we have only 100 big blinds. But here, 150 big blinds effective, we definitely get decent implied odds. And of course, we still have decent equity against ace queen, ace king. But even against those hands, it's not super easy to go to showdown on a lot of board textures.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, Hero decided on a call, and this is for sure the best option. But this is also the problem, right? When you ISO to 8x, even when you're deep, 150 big blinds, we have problems calling a 3-bet. And when we say we ISO to our standard sizing to 25 bucks or to 30 bucks, you can way easier call a 3-bet and you get way better implied odds. That's also a huge plus when you don't ISO super big with those, yeah, good, okay hands, but not with your absolute top range. That's also a huge plus when you ISO a little bit smaller from the early positions.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we end up making the call, and flop looks pretty safe, as good as it gets basically. For tens, 9-7 deuce, rainbow, no flush draws available. Of course, we should always check honest texture, and villain bets 120 into 250. Yeah, what do you think about flop? Is raising an option? Is folding an option? Is calling an option? What's your standard play on this board texture against the c-bet sizing?
Yeah, I mean, folding's definitely out of the question. If he bombed it really big, maybe we could fold. Just because, the bigger players bet on the flop, the more likely they're going to be to continue on the turn, right? They're just going to have a stronger range.
Yep.
Using big bets. So as ridiculous as it is, if he bet, somewhere close to pot or 2/3, I mean, 2/3 would be close, but 3/4 pot, full pot, I'd probably just fold right away. Just because, again, the pre-flop range combined with a massive bet, I would just say, hey, just have it. Pretty clearly the guy has either like queens plus or maybe some ace king, ace queen, but those hands won't necessarily just like bomb pot on this type of flop, right? Unless he's a pretty bad player. So yeah, if it's a decent player who knows what he's doing, or an unknown, who you don't expect to go crazy with ace king or ace queen, we could fold, I believe, to a bigger bet. But against this sizing, we just have to peel one, because we have a pretty decent overpair. We also have a backdoor straight draw, and he can definitely still have the ace kings and ace queen suited. That's a decent amount of combos if he's just betting full range here. So yeah, we'd have to peel one. I think as far as check raising, I wouldn't do it. If this was in like later position, like let's say cut up versus button, I think it's a great spot with so much money in the pot, just like check raise all in, right? And, SPR is low. You can expect him to have a wider range, but here it's just suicidal in my opinion because he's going to have too many overpairs. He just really doesn't have any bluffs, as he said. So you're kind of running into just like queens plus, and then he could, he obviously can't have the ace kings and ace queens, but, so I guess in that case it could be close to check jamming, but I just feel like, yeah, he just has too many of the overpairs, so I would definitely elect to just check call here.
Yeah, and I think on most turns he's definitely slowing down with ace king, ace queen, because people are afraid that you also have a hand like tens, jacks, queens, nines that you are unable to fold. So I think thinking about bet sizing is crucial here. The smaller he bets, the more likely he is to bet full range on the flop, and the bigger he bets, the more likely he is to have an overpair. This is usually how most players play at the live feld, especially in those 2-4, 2-5, 5-5 games. So yeah, pay attention to bet sizing in straight pots out of position. That's a huge tip that we can give you. And like you mentioned, when you think he is betting a hand like ace queen, ace king most of the time, then of course it would be a huge blunder to fold tens. So we should definitely call. And this was what hero did. Turn is another nice blank, because we definitely don't want to see a king or an ace on the turn. Turn is a 3 in hearts. We check. And now villain bets small. That's also something you don't see all the time, because the pot is 500. We have 500 effective, 510. So he could just shove turn, but he elects to 220. And it's definitely not super easy to fold on the turn for under half pot, right? We are still getting a great price. So we should call once more. What do you think?
No, I think here we can probably just get away because we're essentially putting our stack in. If we call here, we can't really fold rivers. Maybe unless an ace hits. But I think on most other, maybe a king, but on other cards we're going to be getting like, I don't know, 4 or 5 to 1, right? So it's like we're kind of committing ourselves right now, in a sense. And I just think, yeah, when he bets twice here, given his range pre-flop and then his post-flop double barrel, I think he just has like queens plus here a ton. I think with queens, I guess the SPR was like 1, so with queens, I'd imagine he probably shoves turn quite often, right? Just get the money and protect more. But with kings and aces, he can definitely just be doing this with this size. And then it's just, again, it's like with ace king, I see a vast majority of players taking showdown here.
Yeah, you never see this. Never ever. This is the point. That his range is so value heavy. Great point. Because yes, we get a good price, but you need to find bluffs in villain's range. And we already talked about it pre-flop, right? That his range is super narrow. So he never has like jack 10 hearts, queen jack hearts, king queen hearts, ace 4, ace 5. He never has those hands. And when he only has like jacks, queens, kings, aces, and occasionally ace king, ace queen in hearts. But even with this hand, I expect my opponent to check back with some frequency. And if he bets turn with ace queen heart, I basically always see a shove, right? Because he wants this fold equity and he does not want to bet half pot and get a crying call. He really wants to have all the fold equity, and that's why you always see a jam by most draws on the turn. But as mentioned, he usually only has one combo, maybe half a combo when he checks with some frequency on the turn with ace king, ace queen hearts. So he basically has queens, kings, aces, maybe jacks. And against this range, of course, you're just smoked, right? And that's, I think, one of the rare spots where I can really argue for folding turn, because folding turn has the highest EV. And of course, this is defined by the positions, right? When we change the scenario, so we open hijack, villain 3-bets on the cutoff, so we just steal 2-3 big blinds, villain goes ahead and bumps it up to 9 big blinds. Completely different scenario. Then I would never, ever, ever consider folding turn, because villain still has all those draws, right? Villain has all the king, queen, hearts and stuff, and all the ace nines and king nine suited from time to time, depending on how light our opponent is going to through it. But here against 8x, so we ISO to 8x, right? And he did through it our 8x open. Completely different scenario, and this is why it's important to always think about villain's preflop range, villain's flop range, villain's turn range, and go from there. And not only see, I have an overpair in a threat pot, he bets half pot, I get a good price, I should call. This is not how you should think about poker hands, I think. And that's the reason why, yes, we have an overpair, but it's still only a bluff catcher, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I think another thing too is that our perceived range is like pretty face up here. Like pretty, a decent player is just going to know we have like 10s through queens here, you know, huge majority of the time. We could have hands like ace king, ace queen suited with backdoor flush draws too, right? But I think the majority of our range is going to be these mid pairs, and people, as you said, are not expecting players to fold. So it's just like, you know, it's just a spot where you can be really exploitative and just make some really big folds in the specific spots. And we're still going to have, you know, you could say something like we could even fold jacks here potentially, and just go with like queens plus, right? And maybe pre-flop trap with hands like aces and kings sometimes, so we have them in a range, you know. But even if we're folding a huge portion of our range here, like just folding tens, any 9x we have, we shouldn't have any 9x, but let's say we fold like tens and jacks and only go here with queens, and then the occasional aces that we have trap pre-flop, something like that is totally fine, because yeah, it's just a spot where you can play, you know, very exploitatively and get away with it for sure.
Yeah, that's important. So you never get exploited in those spots. And as you saw, when you ISO so big, you get into some trouble spots post-flop. So that's another argument for ISOing a bit smaller, that you get somewhat better odds. So you can call more 3-bets, more 4-bets, all the fun stuff. So definitely an argument for that. So yeah, I hope you learned today that sometimes it is a correct play to fold with overpairs, even though we got a good price. So yeah, we wish you best of luck at the tables, and we'll see you next time.
Take it easy, guys.